What's your name?
Pam Glenn.
Okay. Where are you from?
Chicago, born and raised, and I grew up on the northwest side. I went to Taft High School.
How was it there?
It was different at the time. It was like one of the last schools to have any integration, and so it was predominantly white. When I say predominantly white, I mean like probably like 99.5% white when I went there.
No black people?
No black people, no Latinos. I knew one Latino and one Asian person, but in the whole school, and it was a very large school, maybe there were like 5 to 10 kids who weren't white. And there were probably like about 3,000 students.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty different.
Okay. So what you said, did you already say which neighborhood you were from?
Yeah, northwest side, near Jefferson Park, the Jefferson Park area.
How long have you lived in Chicago?
My whole life.
Your whole life?
My whole life.
So, what role do you think you play in your community?
In my community, it depends on what you consider my community. If you're talking about where I live, I've been active there doing volunteer stuff. So I serve hot meals to homeless people at a local school / church, because they have a school and a church there. And in addition to that, I've been active with like some political campaigns. Like now I'm canvassing for one of the potential mayors.
Wow, so you're a very busy woman.
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff, so.
You do a lot of giving back to the community.
I try.
That's great. So, what do you think your definition of community is?
Well, if you talk about the CPS community, that's a community that I've been involved in for like my entire professional career, and I've had a number of roles. I was a teacher for a long time. I was an instructional coach at a network office. I worked in the Office of Literacy at Central Office. Then I worked in the Office of Teaching and Learning at Central Office. I managed high school English curriculum and instruction for the district. And then I became a principal of Southwest Side High School.
So what drives you?
And now I'm here.
What drives you to do all that?
I came from a very blue-collar family, and my parents didn't have a college education, and my dad's family was an immigrant family, and so they couldn't really help guide me towards like a future in terms of like education. And so I kind of had to figure that out for myself. And so I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. And so working in CPS schools, I saw a lot of people like me who had the same experience, and they were going to be first generation college goers. And in that sense, I worked really hard to make sure that I could help kids like realize their dreams. And to see a different future than maybe their parents had, like my parents. So I just was featured in a book that just was published about my work at John Hancock High School, because the Chicago Public School community, it just had a significant increase in the graduation rate, and also in the number of students who are going to college, and also in the scholarship dollars that students are getting. And so one of the major contributors that they believe is like that played a big role in that is Freshmen on Track. And it was based on research that said if freshmen failed a class, if a freshman failed a core class in their freshman year, that it would greatly diminish the likelihood that they would graduate from high school in 4 years. If they failed more than that, it was very unlikely that they would graduate from high school in 4 years. So CPS said, well, maybe we should start focusing on that. And so I was one of the first adopters of like saying, yeah, I want to do it. And so I also was super successful in doing it, because when I started, 57% of the freshmen at the school that I became principal at were on track. And 4 years later, 93% of them were on track to graduate in 4 years. So that was a pretty big jump.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, this is very interesting. I didn't know I was going to get all this information. Beautiful. So,
Also, too, I worked in a lot of communities that I learned a lot from the people in the communities, and one of them was Cabrini Green, when Cabrini Green was still up and running, and I worked there. And then I also worked on the southwest side and the west side. And so I had a chance to work with, even though my high school experience was being surrounded by all white people, my CPS experience was an opportunity to meet all kinds of different people. And so that was one of the exciting pieces of my career that I really think was valuable.
so like, what do you think the difference is? Like, how did that impact you? Like, just coming from an all-white school and then...
Well, my neighborhood was mostly like immigrant families. They were first generation here in America. All of my friends didn't speak English as their first language, and it's just like where my parents settled. I don't think they looked for a neighborhood that was all white. They moved here from Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, and so they just ended up where we were. But the impact, I think, of working with students of color was any myth that I might have like heard about, like
Any of stereotypical
yeah,
things.
stereotypical things. They were all blown up, because I met people of color who were way smarter than I was. Maybe they didn't have as much schooling or experience, but they were super smart, or opportunities, super smart, super talented, and yeah, and I liked being in that environment. I had chances to go to different schools, but I really liked working where I worked.
So, how would your life be different if you lived in a different city or town?
I think I probably would always live in a city. Well, I lived in the city when my kids were growing up. We wanted to live in the city because the city, I think, has more to offer. And my kids are mixed race, so it's more diverse in the city for them. And I don't think we would have made it in the suburbs. We're too opinionated. But yeah, so I forgot, what was the question? Where would I live? If I didn't live in the city, I might live completely far away in the countryside, with nature and not a lot of people. It's either big city or country, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but I do like nature and I like getting away and all of that, but I also like the city and everything that it has to offer.
So, like, if you lived in the country, like, say you lived in the country your whole life and you never been, do you think that your life would have been significantly different?
Oh, yeah. Unless I went someplace to college that was different, and then I probably wouldn't have gone back, because, like, my parents didn't go back, because it was like they were from a farming community.
So did you grow up on a farm or no?
No, I grew up here, but every summer we spent the entire summer in northern Wisconsin, and my grandparents had a real big farm, and I worked on a farm, their farm. Yeah, so I know a lot about farming. Animals, killing animals, harvesting crops, planting crops. I know it all.
Wow, you had a lot of background in character.
Yeah.
So then, do you think all those things that happened to you, did that build up your character and everything?
Yeah, I think so. I think like you know, the more experiences that you have, the more if you're open minded, your life changes and it's better and
In what
it's
way?
more interesting. I'd say it's more interesting for sure.
Because closed-minded people, I don't really think, I can agree with that because I don't think closed-minded people really get anywhere.
They're all like, they all think the same thing, they all, yeah, well, that might be a stereotype, but yeah, they close out others and they only seek like-minded people, and you know, I think the more opportunities you have to meet people who are different or think differently, you learn more.
I completely agree. So, if you could change anything about your community, what would it be?
My community went from being a middle, like a, well, it was like a blue collar community of working people where we live now. And then it slowly became gentrified, and now houses on my block are like worth more than $1 million. They're all selling for more than $1 million, and some close to $2 million. And along with that, the people have changed, and some of them are really nice, but some of them remind me of suburban people who expect a suburban experience, but they want to live in the city. So it's just challenging. Like one person said, there's a blog for our block, and like one person said on the blog that there was an old man in the park, and he was talking to like a kid who was there with the nanny, and she made it sound like he was a pedophile, but he was a grandfather there with his grandson.
Oh, wow.
And she took a picture of him and said, I don't like that guy, you know, and stuff like that. And I'm like, what?
Was it a race issue or?
No, it was an old guy. It was just an old guy, and he just, you know, old people talk to anybody, especially kids, because they're cute. And he was just sitting there, and he talked to a kid, and she made it seem like he was a pervert, and took a picture of him, and I'm like, whoa. And then somebody said on the block, our neighborhood block post, well, did you ask the kid what he was even talking about? And she didn't even ask the kid.
Oh,
yeah.
So she just made it.
Jumped to yeah.
Was it her kid?
No, somebody else's kid that she knew who was there with the nanny. They all have nannies. Yeah.
I hope the guy didn't get in trouble. He didn't get in trouble.
No, but he could have gotten her in trouble for taking a picture of him and spreading it around all over the neighborhood. Somebody who didn't, you know, even know what was going on was making an accusation about him.
Oh, that's really sad. So, how do you think that it's you witnessing that experience impacted you? Like, how do you think?
Well, I think that whenever you have like, I think like diverse neighborhoods make the best neighborhoods, and so when neighborhoods are all of one thing, I think they're limiting, and so like my neighborhood now is like becoming fairly affluent, and I like where we live because it's close to a lot of things that I like, but now it's like a lot of rich people, and it's different.
So you wish there was more middle class people?
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
Right. How do you think that would change like your experience? Just being like, it will be like a better experience for you because you get to relate to other people, like relate more.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, like it's like when people started moving in, they started forming cliques and stuff, and so all of the new people with a lot of money, like, would like not talk to the other people who had been there for a long
What is
time.
this,
It
Mean
was, like,
Girls?
weird. Yeah, it is. It's a little Mean Girls. It's a little Mean Girls. Yeah.
That doesn't, like, your kids don't have to experience that, do you?
No, because they moved. One lives in New York City because they like big cities. They like diversity, and so one lives in New York City. One lives in Paris, France, and my
Wow.
daughter, like, used to live in France, and she moved back here, and she's been in Chicago for the past 3 years.
Okay. So, if you think this view is wrong or unfair, is there a way to change? How do you think your community is viewed by others?
Now, I think people think it's like just where rich people live in the city, because the homes are so expensive, and yeah.
So if you think this view is wrong or unfair, is there a way to change how your community is viewed by others?
It's a hard one. Probably not.
And what makes you say that?
Because it's
kind of hard to get.
You can't. Yeah, because I mean, like, is when you have rents that, like, if you have condos that are selling for a lot of money, then the rents in the neighborhood go up, and so the only people who could afford to pay rent in a community are people who are, like, maybe just starting out, but they're like semi-professionals or professionals, and they're saving money until they can buy their own home. Everybody else is, like, making a lot of money. Most of the people have kids, but the moms don't work. They have nannies, and and they don't have to work, and so so it's not going to change because it's too expensive for middle class or anyone who's not middle class to live there.
So, wow.
And the other thing that was bad about it is, like, when my kids were teenagers, because the neighborhood had changed and they're mostly white people, and they don't look white. They look more like Hispanic because they are mixed race. They're Chinese and white, but they look more like they're Latino. The police started stopping them and asking them what they were doing in the neighborhood and stuff. And when they said they lived there, they would, like, hassle them and say, "No, you don't. Where do you really live?" Like, blah blah blah. And that was what it was like.
Oh, was it like? Is it for your neighborhood?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, like, the cops were like, what are non-white kids doing in this white neighborhood, essentially?
Yikes.
Yeah, we had some real bad experiences.
So
one time the police picked up my son right on our block, and it was 2 minutes past curfew, 2 minutes, and instead of taking him home, they drove around with him and went around the whole neighborhood picking up other people, and they kept him at the police station until, like, about 3 o'clock in the morning. I had already reported him missing because he told me he was coming home, and then I found out that he was right on the block, and they picked him up like 2 minutes after curfew. They could have just, like, said, "Okay, we'll drop you off at your door," but no, instead they drove him around and hit him with a billy club and beat these other kids up. And
they hit your son?
Yeah, he was all bruised up, and they thought it was not going to be a white person when I came in, and when they saw me come in, I'm not even going to get into it, but that's my neighborhood.
Wow. And what does your son look like? What race is your son?
Well, they're half Chinese and half white, but they look like they're Hispanic. Here, I'll show you a picture of them.
So you think if your son was white, this would have never happened?
No. Because they didn't bother their friends.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was your
So
son
we have
was
a unique
with
experience.
his friends?
Mhm.
And they only got him?
Mhm. Mhm. Let's see.
That's real bad. Did you, like, file a report? Can you even file a report for that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, this is my daughter.
Oh.
I'll show you my son. Let's see, I visited him in New York on my way back from Paris. So I took a picture of him recently with his dog. There he is with his dog.
Oh.
Doesn't he look like he's like maybe Hispanic?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then let's see. Oh, here's my other son. That's in Paris.
Oh, is that your son and your daughter?
No, that's a friend of his.
Oh, okay. So, oh man. So, he had to come back home with
Yeah,
bruises
that's
and
another.
everything.
Yeah, with his dog.
Was that the one or the
Yeah,
one?
that's no, the oldest one. Yeah.
That was the oldest
Yeah,
one.
but he got picked up too, like for stupid stuff, and they tried to make up like that they were doing stuff, and they didn't even have any evidence. Yeah, that was before like all this trouble with the Chicago Police Department picking on minorities. You know, like before the Laquan McDonald and before all the interviews and stuff. Did you listen to the news today? They said that Jason Van whatever.
Van Dyke.
Yeah, that he that they paid out $325,000 to another man that he beat up. They were interviewing him today at his sentencing because they can't bring any of that stuff up during the trial. But that police officer was picking up black boys for a long time and black men and getting rough with them and
For
pushing
no
them
reason.
around, yeah, before he finally shot somebody. But anyway, that's not really part of your
I mean, yeah, it really does because it has a lot to do with the community experience. So it's just really sad that happens to minorities. And then just because of skin color, like I just feel like that's so stupid. So all cities have to deal with issues like violence. How does the issue of violence in Chicago compare to other major cities?
Well, my son likes Paris. There's some violence there now because there's a lot of protests, but he likes Paris because there's less violence. And there's more different kinds of people there. And nobody looks down on black people there.
Right.
That's why a lot of black people moved to Paris during the they like when the Harlem Renaissance was going on and black artists and writers were coming up in the United States. They were finding that they weren't like respected and stuff. So there was a whole bunch of expatriates who moved to like places like Paris, France, because they were respected there. And that's interesting to look into too, like the expat movement of African American artists to Europe. It's interesting.
I should go and search that when I get home. The more you know. So, what are the top 3 issues, concerns that you like to address or start a dialogue with your community or peers about? Maybe the minority issue that you were talking about?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but I don't know, like there are some minorities that are moving into the neighborhood in our aldermanic race, like that's coming up. There's a couple non-white candidates, and one is doing pretty well, so that'll be interesting to see what happens with him, because he's Hispanic.
What's his name?
What's that? I have to look it up.
Do you think he would make
Negron. His
Negron.
last name is Negron, Negron.
Do you think he's going to make a positive impact?
Well,
if you wanted
depends if he's elected, the new alderman.
Okay. So, if you were in charge of the media, what would you show And what would you do to change the perception of